welcome to the Digital Signage Today podcast. I'm Judy Model, editor of Digital Signage Today. Our topic is all about transforming existing hardware into a unified, secure digital signage ecosystem. Our guest is Cullen Gross. He's a sales engineer at Carousel Digital Signage. So for 30 years, Carousel has been a trusted digital signage platform for corporate organizations, educational institutions, and government agencies. In his role, Cullen blends technical know-how with creative thinking in a way that's hard to find. With 10 years at Carousel and extensive experience in digital signage under his belt, he's played a key role in continually improving the Carousel experience with an eye toward what's coming. So thanks for being here, Cullen.
Thank you, Judy, for having me.
So you've been in digital signage for over 10 years.
Yes.
What paradigm shifts have you seen in the industry when it comes to media player hardware overall?
Yeah, so I think it's a culmination of a lot of paradigm shifts, right? Like a lot of different changes in 10 years. I think the important thing when it comes to the shift in hardware is going to be sort of this post-pandemic paradigm shift where we went from like marketing teams kind of owning the signage platform and deploying the signage platform to IT teams ending up being the ones both inheriting previous systems and the ones being tasked with setting up new systems. And that really changes a lot when an IT team talks to you and says, here's our plan versus a marketing team, right? Because like a marketing team kind of knows the messaging that they want to achieve, they understand how to market that. But sometimes when they just get told this is the hardware you need, they say, okay. I will say that because the IT teams are now leading these conversations, it is much more focused into using hardware they already have or leveraging things that they're used to. I think also there's a paradigm shift overall when it comes to just software in general. I think we've reached the full adoption of like cloud services, right? But in that as well, organizations have adopted much more mature security practices, right? So when they think of adding a new piece of hardware to the system, they're thinking about not just security of the device, the hardening of the device, the networking of the device, but also where that data is stored, where it's coming from. So they come from a much more surgical perspective than we've seen in even the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years.
Okay, so when you discover that a customer can use hardware they already have and use it well, what is their reaction typically, and why is that so important to an IT group?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really a sigh of relief, right? Because I mean, the big thing is when you have like a new piece of hardware, there's a lot that goes into it, right? You have to, of course, vet that hardware itself. If it's a platform that they've never used before, they're going to have to assign someone to learn it and become the subject matter expert on just this one small thing in like a larger ecosystem. So I think that the biggest thing that they kind of take away is that there's sort of this kind of win that they don't have to have this whole hardware conversation, right? Which really cuts about half of that conversation out of the kind of purchasing, verification phase. And then the fact that they already know these systems, right? So they have hardware that they've already used or are going to reuse for another purpose. They understand the security, the hardening. They already have certificates in place for the network for these things. I think that the unknowns is like a cloud. It just like vanishes, right? And they can see that perspective much easier. And that really allows us to take them to the communication side of signage, right? And kind of get back down to those marketing teams. Right. So the fact that they can trust those devices and they're already used to them, like really just lightens the weight on their shoulders.
Yeah, is it something they're aware of, or is it a discovery process when you guys are talking to them? Like maybe in their minds they're thinking they can't use what they have.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of that paradigm shift we talked before is like if someone has previous experience with digital signage 5-10 years ago, they were used to having to purchase the hardware from the signage company, right? And then like do service agreements for repairs on those things. So I think a lot of people who have historical context signage on their own, sometimes they're like super surprised. They're like, we were planning on this huge cost for hardware, right? And I would say that IT teams that don't have experience with signage before, when we tell them they can use their own hardware, they're kind of not surprised, right? Because they logically they feel like that's kind of how they could enter the system, right? So we're surprising people who have experience, and the people who have no experience, they just feel like that process is nice and smooth.
Right? Because, IT buyers are notoriously cautious and they love, the approved existing, because it's predictable and known. How does Carousel lean into that existing trust rather than fighting against it?
Absolutely. I think we've set our first. I'll kind of approach this question in two ways. One is just how we set ourselves up as an organization, and then how we gain that trust. So one thing that we haven't done for probably probably 7 or 8 years is we do not sell any hardware, like, at all. We don't resell any hardware, right? So there's no incentive of us to like go one way or another. Typically, these customers of ours are kind of going through a reseller or a integrator that's kind of helping them wrap it all together. So we kind of do two things. One, they already have like deep trust with these integrators, right? And we want to make sure that that relationship is solid still. Like if they've already deployed X amount of other solutions with an integrator and they come talk to us, we want to make sure that that trust is there as well. And then as far as kind of from our role talking directly to the customer, we want to kind of achieve this trusted advisor role, right? Where we kind of ask them, of course, on the digital signage side, what do you want on display? What's the outcome? What's the payoff? But then also the next questions are like, what technology do you use now? Like, what are you used to? And
Right.
sometimes we can surprise them when they find out that there's devices that might not be typically all signage, that might be like conference room stuff, or they want to embed it on a web page, where we end up being able to support way more hardware than they thought, and that can kind of sometimes make the system a little bit bigger. But really kind of leaning in with asking them what are they comfortable with, what is their past experience, and kind of letting them kind of braze that trail, and then us kind of giving our opinions versus totally shifting their idea, right, and making them go a certain way. I think that reduces friction for sure, and that also builds trust. And then as they continue to grow, they can continue to leverage those same assets that they've already purchased or familiar with using.
Right. And, in doing that, it's a clear message that you're not just there to sell them every possible thing, right? You're trying to get them what they need and do it in the most economical and efficient way as well. So immediately to me, that would build trust, right?
Right, and I think from an operational standpoint too, right? It is a SaaS model, right?
Right.
It does sort of depend on customers renewing, and I think that there's a special. I've said this before in other locations, but I think signage is much more a continually improving sort of situation for organizations versus a one-time purchase, right? So a lot of customers, their communication strategy completely changes halfway through, and sometimes their hardware might even change halfway through. It's being able to find a partner, both from an integrator perspective or a signage provider perspective, that can adopt with you, so that as your needs change, like the solution can change. And I think that that also gives them the trust that they can come back to us and say, hey, I know we had 5-6 hours talking about this. We've completely changed our approach. And we say, okay, like, we'll just take this from here and continue to go. And I think that that from an IT perspective, right, the fact that they can pivot in that way, in a way that they're not like exploring other worlds of hardware,
Right.
huge sigh of relief.
Yeah, and they're not honed in, and you know, the IT department itself has so much pressure on it, right? From economics to meeting customer needs to, fulfilling all the tech, advantages out there. That being able to work with Carousel like that, it's almost like you're part of them. You're with them. You're not just, a company on the other side, doing a sales pitch kind of thing. So when it comes to this, when it comes to relying on hardware already in place, how much faster can a company get up and running?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it depends on the scale of the deal. It
Okay.
kind of depends on the organization's goals, but I mean, conservatively, half the time, right? Like if we take it piece by piece, right, when we're verifying a new piece of hardware, right? Typically, the timeline is the organization has to look into this hardware on their own, right? So there's kind of like a phase of adding this to someone's docket where they look up the hardware, they go learn it, they get the documentation, they become a subject matter expert on it. So that can take some time because these IT teams are doing a lot all the time anyway, right? Like they're not going to drop everything and look up this new box. So they would have to obtain that hardware, order one, install it, and then of course test and play with it, right? For security. And like this alone can be weeks, if not months, right?
Right.
And then if they do pass all of those internal tests, right? Now it comes to even ordering the correct quantity of this hardware, right?
Right.
So if you need 50, if you need 100 of these devices, especially like in the last year, we've seen that like supply chains are just a little bit slower, right? They're
Right.
adapting to conditions.
Right.
That this could be like, oh, we're a month out, we're 2 months out on even giving you this, wave of hardware. So that gets cut off, and then there's always like usually like a verification phase, a trial phase where you match the hardware with the software, and then you try that out. So when it comes to new hardware, like there's a lot of roadblocks, right? And I think it's from those organizations becoming mature with the cloud and with security, right? Like they don't want any sort of mishap that's going to come back on them, either from a security standpoint or financial standpoint. So those things just kind of disappearing, like that's like a thing, like the cloud just disappears, the fog just disappears. They're like, this is well known, these are all steps we don't have to do. That can really take a deal from, I don't know, 4 months to a month and a half, right? From like discovering to implementing,
Right.
which can make them look really good when they're tasked with, hey, we need a digital signage solution, IT team solve it.
Right.
And then if they can come back and say, hey, it's been a month and a half and that content you want is up on the screen, that looks really good. What
And,
doesn't look good is, hey, boss, we have to wait 2.5 months to get these devices.
right. And hopefully, like you said, with the supply chain, situation, whether they arrive or not, or whether they all arrive, there's also a lot of uncertainty, in that
Right.
phrase of it. So in this economy where every dollar is being scrutinized, especially within the IT enterprise, how does Carousel enable an IT leader to launch a new system by leveraging that existing infrastructure instead of having to create a whole new hardware budget?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's the financial benefit of being able to use hardware that they're already used to, right? And that's a real cost, right? That's a real cost saving in hard dollars. So by asking the questions like, what are you using? What are you used to? Sometimes we can find out like, hey, there's this hardware that isn't just like old hardware that we're making do with. This is hardware that can actually achieve these goals, right? So they save on that cost. But then also kind of walking through like their team, how they are organized, how they operate, we can help them figure out like a device management plan for specifically for digital signage that works within their ticketing system, right? Or sends them emails to keep them up to date. And then a lot of IT teams end up talking about they're tasked with setting this up, but they want to kind of hand it off to another team to actually manage the content perspective. So a lot of our like initial conversations around hardware also kind of blend into management and then kind of rights and roles. And then that is time saving, right? So that's like another cost, right? Like an IT professional, right?
Right.
Having to spend 2 or 3 weeks on something. If we can kind of help use our 30 years of experience to kind of show the path well traveled and they just have to walk it, that
Right.
can save a lot of time as well as actual dollars.
All right. So before we wrap up, are there any other tips or advice maybe that you can share that give our listeners kind of a heads up as they go into that journey of deploying digital signage with the hardware they have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think number one is to kind of get an inventory of like what you have and what you're used to, right? So if you're an IT team that has been tasked with um, setting up a signage system, just kind of like look at the platforms you're already using and kind of just put that into your existing scope, right? Like these are the things, like if you kind of walk in with that, it kind of can help really reduce the conversation time. And then two, if you're not an IT team, but you're either going to task an IT team or you want to request it, sort of understanding the devices you log into and the devices you use can help the IT team know before they start this journey that they don't have to really reinvent the wheel. I think being able to understand your internal system to kind of prevent that heartburn from happening can definitely help.
Right.
And then I would also just say that like now in the sort of SaaS model of signage, and the hardware being so agnostic these days, right? Is that the signage side, the software side, can change pretty rapidly,
Right.
right? So looking at hardware that is not, it might be purpose built but isn't vendor locked, allows you to like pivot on the software side, which means that us as software providers are much more beholden to improving that experience, right? I think the onus is now on us to continue providing that value. And I think knowing that when you're going into a system helps you kind of get some leverage there.
Yeah. And, and also kind of get some technical stuff set up so that you can focus on, the creative side. And because the ultimate goal is having that signage make an impact. So it's
Yeah,
been great.
I would say you're 100% right. Organizations want the signage to be heavy, right? They want that the messaging to be impactful. They have real hard goals, communication goals, but they don't want it to be heavy on the IT side or the creation side, right? So let's focus time on where it matters, and that's really these content strategies. Let's really spend all of our time in there, and then let's just use what you already have, make that conversation short and easy, and then in the end have a much more laser focused solution like for these needs.
Right. Well, Cullen, has been great talking with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation again, Judy. It's the second time here, and you
Yeah,
guys are great. And
can
thanks for
talk
your
to you
time.
every day. So thanks for your expert insight. It's very valuable, I think, especially for companies out there that are dipping their toe into digital signage and may think, erroneously, oh, it means all new hardware, all new this, all new that. So, to me, this is a very strong message that, you can do digital signage probably for less work and maybe even less money than you, initially thought, right?
Absolutely.
So, to our listeners, if you're heading to InfoComm, Carousel wants you to stop by their booth to learn more about why Carousel is the best choice for enterprise grade digital signage. Their booth number is C9582. And also check out Digital Signage Today. As we always post our latest podcast, and you don't want to miss another one. And this has been one of the great ones. So thank you again, Cullen.